The doors shut on my backpack strap, not gently, not like a normal commuter train trying to keep a schedule. It cinched down like a hand. I yanked free and stumbled into the car, half expecting somebody to shout at me for holding things up. Nobody did, because nobody inside was looking at me. Everybody outside was. Through the dirty glass, a line of people on the platform stared, like I'd stepped into the wrong room at a funeral. Their faces weren't angry, not exactly. More like relieved it wasn't them. I stood there with snow melting off my hair and down the back of my neck, trying to catch my breath. The train rolled. I told myself the staring meant nothing. I told myself I was just late. Again. That's what I was good at. Being late, showing up wrong, missing the obvious angle everyone else could see. I'd been riding a bus from a park and ride outside Ashtabula, Ohio, into the city for a makeup exam. The bus died on the shoulder, a coughing, shuddering thing that finally gave up when the road turned slick and white. The driver popped the hood and waved us off like it was our problem now. Everybody scattered to call rides or trudge back toward the gas station glow. I ran, not because I loved school, not because I cared about the class, because the makeup exam was for the only course I couldn't brute force with late-night memorizing, spatial analysis. The professor had that soft, polite cruelty some people perfect when they know you can't argue. You keep flattening everything, she'd written in red ink across my last test. You don't see the object. You see the idea of the object. I'd tried explaining to my parents that I wasn't built for engineering, that their faith in my potential felt like a weight strapped to my back. Dad sent me a screenshot of my tuition statement. Mom told me to stop being dramatic, so I ran through wind that burned my throat, across a lot crusted with salt, up onto a platform with a train already waiting. And I didn't stop to read the sign. I didn't stop to check anything at all. I just jumped. Now, the car rocked under me, metal wheels finding their rhythm, and the heat hit like opening an oven. It wasn't comfortable heat. It was dry and aggressive, the kind that makes your skin feel tight. My boots warmed from the floor up. My shirt stuck to my back. The car should have felt empty. It looked empty at first glance. Just a few people scattered across old vinyl seats. But the air was thick with something else. Oil, old smoke, wet wool that never dried. And underneath it, a sweet, sour note, like a basement that had been locked too long. I slid into a seat near the doors and pressed my shoulder to the window, partly for balance, partly to get away from the smell. Outside, the platform lights fell behind. The last thing I saw was the line of faces turning together as the train pulled away, like sunflowers. I took my phone out of habit, thumbed the screen, and watched the map spin like it didn't recognize the ground beneath me. No service, no data, fine. That happened on this route. I put it away before it could annoy me. I dug into my bag instead, found my notes, and stared at diagrams that had always felt like they were written for a different species. Lines, planes, intersections. The same problem, over and over. How to describe a solid object from partial views. How to understand the whole when you could only see slices. It made my stomach clench. And then, without warning, I realized the car had gotten hotter, not gradually, suddenly, like somebody had turned a dial. Across the aisle, a man in a high-vis jacket sat completely still, hands folded in his lap. Near the far end, a woman in a knit hat stared down at her shoes like she'd lost something on the floor. Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. That's when I noticed something else. No bags, no coffee cups, no headphones. The people on this train weren't commuting. They weren't traveling. They were placed. I swallowed and tried to breathe shallowly, like that would keep the air out of me. At the next set of seats, a young guy slid into view, not walking down the aisle like a normal person, but already there the moment I looked, like my brain had skipped the part where he arrived. He sat across from me without asking. He wasn't scary looking, just plain. Mid-20s, maybe. Clean sweatshirt, hands with short nails, no grease, no dirt. The unsettling part was what he did next. He took a folded slip of paper from his pocket and set it on the seat between us. Then he tapped it twice and pushed it toward me. I stared at the paper. He didn't look at my face. He looked at my notes, the diagrams poking out of my bag. His eyes tracked the lines like he was reading them. Then he reached into his own bag and pulled out a ticket, an old cardstock thing, the kind you'd see in a museum display, and held it up so I could see the blank rectangle where the destination should have been. He flipped it over. On the back, in neat block letters, it read, "Don't show them you're lost." He set the ticket down and tapped my folded slip again. My throat went dry. I didn't want to touch it. Touching it felt like agreeing to something. But the heat kept climbing, and the smell kept thickening, and the car's windows had fogged so hard I could barely make out the world outside. So I unfolded the paper. It was a ripped piece of notebook page. The handwriting was careful, like somebody forcing their hand to stay steady. There are stations that aren't on any map. If you got on without meaning to, you have to get off while it still looks normal. If it stops at the elevator, don't stay. I read it twice. I looked up. The young guy was watching me now, expression flat, like he wasn't pleading or threatening, just stating a fact. I started to shake my head, a small, stubborn refusal, my brain reaching for its usual tools, sarcasm, denial, the belief that everything strange had an ordinary explanation if you squinted hard enough. He slid his own pen out and wrote one more line beneath the others, then turned the page so I could see. You study space. Start using it. I wanted to laugh. I almost did. But I couldn't ignore what my body was telling me. The wrongness in the air, the heat that didn't match winter, the way the other passengers sat like mannequins. I stuffed the paper into my pocket like it was contraband. Then the train began to slow, not with a smooth deceleration, but with a heavy drag, like something beneath us had grabbed the wheels. Metal complained. The floor trembled. The young guy stood. He didn't look at me. He looked at the door. And when the train finally stopped, he raised his hand and pointed, not forward, not back, but straight down, 2 sharp motions, as if to say, "Here, now." The doors at the end of the car hissed open. Cold air poured in so fast it felt like a slap. I stepped into the vestibule and froze. We weren't at any station I recognized. There was a platform, yes, but it was rough concrete with no signage, no benches, no trash cans, just a single light pole swaying in the wind. Beyond it stood a grain elevator, tall and dark, its corrugated sides striped with snow, like something abandoned and still working anyway. Tracks splintered away into drifts in multiple directions, dead ends half buried, as if rail lines had been laid by someone who didn't believe in destinations. A few men waited near the open door of the next car. All of them wore black, not coats, suits. They moved with practiced coordination, not talking, not gesturing much, just doing what they'd done many times before. And between them, they carried a long wooden box, a coffin. The young guy went down the steps onto the platform. He didn't run. He didn't hurry. He simply walked away from the open door like he knew exactly how much attention that would draw. Then he turned back and looked up at me. He didn't wave. He pointed at my chest, at my pocket, at the note I'd folded away. Then he made a motion with his fingers, pinched them together, and pulled them apart, like opening a seam, like splitting a line. And he mouthed something I couldn't hear, not a voice, just lips forming a shape. The door started to close. I made a decision that didn't feel like a decision at all. I stepped back inside. The doors shut. The train lurched, and we rolled forward again, leaving the grain elevator and the coffin men behind like it was just another stop. I stood there in the vestibule, heart hammering. The young guy was gone. Gone like he'd never existed. I pushed back into the car. The air inside had changed. Colder now, but not in a clean way. A damp cold that crawled under my clothes and sat against my skin. The heat hadn't been turned down. It had been replaced. The man in the high-vis jacket turned his head, not toward me, toward the empty seat I'd been in. The woman in the knit hat did the same. One by one, the scattered passengers rotated like they'd been waiting for a cue. Their eyes weren't hostile. They were assessing, like I was something that had rolled onto their track. A woman at the far end stood up. She wore a conductor's uniform that didn't match any transit line I'd ever seen. No name tag, no logo. Just a dark coat and a cap pulled low. She walked straight toward me. Not fast, not slow. I fumbled in my pocket, grabbed for cash I didn't have, for a student ID that suddenly felt like a joke. She stopped an arm's length away and held out a ticket punch. The metal looked old, with dulled edges like it had been used to mark more than paper. I reached for my wallet. She didn't take it. She simply angled the punch toward my pocket, where my own train ticket should have been. Because that's when I realized I didn't have one. I'd jumped on. I'd never bought anything. The conductor's eyes dropped to my empty hands. Then she reached into her coat, pulled out a small printer, handheld, battered, and fed a strip of cardstock through it. It whirred. It spat out a ticket. She pressed it to my chest. Her finger, cold through the paper, held it there until I took it. Then she walked away without looking back. I stared down. The ticket had no destination, no origin, just a line of numbers that meant nothing, and a seat assignment that was only a symbol, a blank square. I looked up again. The passengers were watching, not with anger, with expectation, like this solved something for them. I backed into the aisle and started moving through the train, not toward the front, not toward the rear, just away from their eyes. The next car was worse. The seats were arranged wrong, too close, too far, angled slightly, as if the whole interior had been drafted by someone who'd never sat down. The windows were opaque with grime and frost. When I wiped one with my sleeve, it cleared just enough to show trees passing outside. But the trees were bare in a way that didn't look like winter. They looked peeled, like something had stripped them down beyond wood. I moved faster. The next car wasn't passenger seating at all. It was filled with stacked furniture, chairs, dressers, lamps, everything jammed in like a storage unit on wheels. Among the piles were shoes, single shoes, hundreds of them. different sizes, different styles, all facing different directions, like they'd been taken off in a hurry. My breathing turned ragged. I told myself to stop, to think, to do what the note said. Use space. Use it like the diagrams. I glanced at the walls, the doors, the seams where cars connected. That's when I noticed the blank square on my ticket. Not a seat number, a shape, a coordinate. I pulled the torn note from my pocket and unfolded it with shaking fingers. There was more writing on the back now. I swear there hadn't been. Empty cars don't look at you. If you can't get off, get unseen. A square is a room with 4 corners. Find the corners. My mouth went dry again. I looked down the aisle. Ahead, a door led into another car. Its window was black, like the lights inside were off. An empty car. I pushed forward, stepping around piles of furniture and shoes, gripping my ticket so hard it bent. The door resisted at first, like it didn't like being touched. Then it gave. I stumbled into darkness. The air in this car was different, colder, cleaner, like stepping into a walk-in freezer that hadn't been opened in years. No seats, no windows, just bare metal walls and a floor scuffed with old drag marks. A freight car, or something pretending to be one. I turned, pulled the door shut, and found a latch. It wasn't meant for passengers, but it was there. I slid it into place. For the first time since boarding, the sensation of eyes on me eased, not gone, just muffled. I leaned against the wall and tried to steady my breathing. That's when the train hit a bump and my bag thumped against my hip, reminding me I was still carrying my notes. I pulled them out, almost hysterical at the idea that I'd brought homework into whatever this was. The pages fluttered open, and the drawings were wrong. Not my handwriting, not my diagrams. These were new pages, ink black and precise. A floor plan, a square room, 4 corners marked with the same symbol printed on my ticket. And in the center of the square, drawn in thick lines, was a small figure, a person. Me. The walls of the freight car creaked, not like settling metal, like something flexing. I looked up. The seams in the walls, where panels met, had shifted. Not much. Just enough that the corners of the car looked sharper than they should. The room was trying to become the drawing. My heartbeat roared in my ears. I put my palm against the nearest corner. The metal there felt different, not colder, softer, like a membrane stretched tight. I pressed harder. It gave, not with a dent, with depth. My hand sank in up to the knuckles, and I snatched it back like the wall had bitten me. The air smelled suddenly like ozone and wet earth. I stared at the corner, at the spot where my hand had disappeared. Then I did the only thing my brain could manage. I held my ticket up to it, the blank square, the corner, the drawing. I lined them up like a desperate geometry proof, and the corner opened. Not like a door, like a cut, a perfect right angle that unfolded into darkness beyond the wall. I didn't climb through immediately, because on the other side I could see a platform, concrete, snow, a line of lights, a station that looked like downtown Cleveland, except everything beyond the platform was black. No cars, no streetlights, no glow from buildings, just a city shape with the power turned off. The platform was empty. And then I saw something that made my stomach drop through the floor, a poster on a nearby column, a found notice. Not missing, found. A black and white photo of a young man, plain sweatshirt, clean hands, the guy who'd given me the note. Under the photo, bold letters, "Thank you for writing." My breath caught. I stepped through the corner. My boots hit gritty concrete. Snow stung my face. Real cold, real wind. Behind me, the cut in the freight car sealed itself like skin. The train sat there, idling without sound, its surface a dull gray that swallowed the station lights instead of reflecting them. No other doors opened. No other passengers got off. Just me. I backed away, and the train began to move. Not forward, not down the tracks. It slid sideways, impossible, smooth, like it was being erased from the world at an angle I couldn't see. In seconds, it was gone, leaving only a faint smear of diesel smell and drifting snow. The station was dead. I walked to the edge of the platform and looked out at the city. Cleveland was there in outline, but every window was dark. The skyline was a silhouette. The river was a black ribbon without reflections. I checked my phone again out of pure habit. The screen lit. No service. But there was one thing there that hadn't been before. A file. A video, untitled, no thumbnail. And beneath it, a single line of text that made my hands go numb, playing now on someone else's device. I didn't press anything. I didn't have to, because as I stood there alone in a station that looked like home after everyone had gone, I realized what the blank ticket meant. It wasn't missing a destination. It was waiting for one. It was waiting for a person-shaped coordinate to fill the square. And that's the part you need to understand, because you're already holding something you didn't mean to pick up. Maybe it's your phone. Maybe it's your earbuds. Maybe it's just this story playing in your head while you sit on your own train, your own bus, your own ride home. You think you're listening to me. You think you're safe because you're not the one who ran and jumped without checking the sign. But that file on my screen didn't say it was playing on a station speaker. It didn't say it was playing in the air. It said someone else's device. Yours. So, if the people on your platform are staring a little too hard right now, don't stare back. If the heat in your car feels wrong, don't complain. And if a ticket prints out with a blank square where the seat should be, don't crumple it up. Don't toss it. Because the train doesn't care what you meant to do. It only cares whether there's finally someone willing to sit in the empty place. And the moment you look down to read what's on the back of that ticket, I won't be the one telling this story anymore. You will.